Hello everyone, welcome back to Educately Geography. Today we're going to be talking about compasses, so let's get started. Today's objectives, first we're just going to discuss how compasses work. Then we're just going to explain what declination is. We're going to get into that. It's like a very important thing to know whenever you're using a compass in the open world. And finally, we're just going to talk about the basics of how to use a compass in general, in like real life. So first, how do compasses work? So first you have to know that compasses, they detect Earth's magnetic field and they orient themselves according to that. We talked about the magnetic field in a different video about Earth's poles. Highly recommend checking that out. But the magnetic field is basically like a force that's like a forceful field that's around Earth. It protects it from solar wind particles. And that's how compasses like orient themselves. How does this work? Well, I mean, you have to know how magnets work. Magnets have two poles. They have a north pole and a south pole. And the north pole of any magnet is attracted to the south pole of a different magnet. This means that the southern pole of like the needle, of your compass, usually this needle is like red or it's like depicted with like some like identifiable color. This southern pole is attracted to the Earth's magnetic north pole, and as a result, it points to that magnetic pole. The magnetic north pole, again, we talked about this in a different video. That's basically where the Earth's magnetic field digs vertically into the Earth and the Earth's surface. So this is where a compass is going to point. So this goes into the next topic about declination. Because a compass points to the magnetic North Pole and not the geographic North Pole, which is 90 degrees latitude. That's where Earth's axis of rotation, intersects with the surface. That's like the geographic North Pole is how we think of direction, but compasses don't think about it like that. Compasses point to the magnetic North Pole, which is different, and depending on where you are on Earth's surface, this can lead to like sometimes a pretty substantial error in where your compass is actually pointing. So, say this is where the magnetic North Pole is, and this is where the geographic North Pole is. Obviously this map is flat, so it's not going to be like a perfect example, and you want to go north, your compass is going to point to the magnetic North Pole, which is right here. But as you can see, that if you follow that direction, you're not actually going to go north, because north is this way. North is where the geographic North Pole is. So this leads to an error. We call that declination. And to adjust for it, you can still use your compass, obviously. This doesn't mean you can't use a compass. You just have to adjust for declination. We're not going to talk about that in this video because it completely depends on which compass you're using. Every brand of compass, pretty much each brand has a different way of like adjusting for declination. So if you ever purchase a compass or use one, just be sure to use follow the instructions to how to adjust for declination, and also just how to use it. We're going to get into like how do you use a compass, but still just look at the directions given by your compass. First, we have to talk about the parts of a compass. For the rest of this video, we're just going to be talking about a specific type of compass known as a base plate compass, mostly because this is like the most identifiable and like frequently used, most likely a compass in the world today. Okay, so here are the parts. This isn't our illustration. It's from a website called Wilderness. Okay, so first we have the direction of travel arrow. You're going to point this wherever or for the most part, this is where you're going to be pointing your compass. So if you're moving in a direction, that's where you're going to point it. You're going to make sure this is facing in front of you. You don't point it at yourself. Let's see, you have an orienting arrow. Okay, so the orienting arrow is like inside this rotating dial or bezel, and we'll talk about how you use it, okay? And magnetic needle, this points to the magnetic North Pole. You have like a housing for like all of like this structure right here. This dial, we call it a bezel in this video, but it's something that you can spin around. We talk about how to use that. And then the declination marker, this is important if you're adjusting your compass for declination. Again, that's something you should, rely on like the instructions given by your compass. All right, so first we're just going to talk about how you can find the direction which you're facing using your compass. This is like the most basic thing you can do with your compass. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is you have to place your compass flat on your palm. Basically, your hand is basically just parallel to the ground. And then you have to point the travel arrow or the direction of travel arrow forward. So just, in other words, don't point it at yourself because then you're doing it backwards. So then you have to rotate the bezel or dial so that the orienting arrow, so this red little pointer thing right here, not the magnetic needle, but the red pointer that's inside the housing. So you have to rotate that until it falls directly underneath the red magnetic, or it doesn't have to be red, but the magnetic needle. So they're basically just on top of each other. We call this like red in the shed, because this red needle's inside the shed, which is the orienting arrow. So yeah, the degree measure on the bezel. So like basically once you rotate this dial, the degree measure that you read, because it has degree measures right here, all around it, that's going to tell you the degrees of like the direction that you're facing. So if it goes all the way to, let's say, 90 degrees, which is right there, that would mean you're pointing due east. 0 degrees would be north. 270 would be due west, and then 180 would be due south. And obviously, if you're in the middle, you can say like northeast or north-northeast. If you're kind of close to north, you can just adjust like that. It tells you the degrees. So say you want to go in a specified direction, like you tell yourself, I want to go east or west. Well, and that's a little different, okay, but we can do that too. So first, you just rotate the bezel or the dial so that the degree/direction is set to the top. So like the degree that you want to go to, or like the direction, say you want to go east. You rotate this until the east, which in this case is right here, is on the top. So it matches with the top notch. And again, you're putting your compass flat on your hand or your palm. So now you physically turn around with your compass like still flat in your hand and still in front of you. And you continue turning around until the magnetic needle moves inside the orienting needle. Obviously, the orienting needle is the location of it has changed because you have rotated the bezel. But now you're moving the red needle by turning around, because again, the red needle points directly north. So you only can move it if you rotate. So yeah. And just follow the travel arrows, and now whichever direction you're pointing, once that red needle falls into the orienting arrow, just follow the direction that's given by the travel arrow, and that's the direction that you want it to go in if you've done it correctly. So yeah. And the last thing we're going to talk about is taking a bearing from a map. Okay, so this is a bit more complicated, and this is a long process. So stick with me. If you need any more assistance with this one in particular, I recommend checking out a YouTube video. There's plenty of people that have made videos on survival tactics using compasses, but we're going to take a stab at it right here. So first, you need a map, because this is taking a bearing from a map. Okay, so you have to orient your map. And the way you orient your map is basically if you're like in the wilderness, you just like get your map. You put your compass flat on your map. You make sure that your dial has north facing properly up. So north is like what's set on this notch right here. North in the same direction as the direction of travel arrow. And then you just place your compass, you align it with like the edge of your map, or like whatever way you can place it, so like it's pointing in like the straight up in like the right direction. Usually the way you do this is by putting it on the edge and like lining up like these ruler like sides towards the edge. So yeah, so using your map, okay, first now you want to mark both your location, so wherever you are at this moment, and then the place that you want to go. So just mark both of those on your map. Okay, so now you can use the ruler. If you have your own ruler, that's great, but you can always just use like the side of the space plate compass. This is why they have like these little markers on them. Just use a ruler to connect the 2 points that you've drawn. And yeah, once you do that, just point, like using your actual compass, just point the travel arrow, so the direction of travel arrow, to wherever your destination is. Okay, so you've made 2 points, like say one's right here and one's right here. Just connect those and then point your compass so it points towards your destination. So you just don't you don't point it on your map upside down. And again, you're putting your compass flat on your map if that's not clear already. All right, so now what you have to do is you have to rotate the bezel or dial to proper orientation. And what I mean by this is if you look closely inside the dial, you'll see these flat vertical lines that go up. So what you want to do is you want to rotate your bezel, because your compass might be at a diagonal or sideways right now based on how you had to connect the two marks that you made. So just rotate this until these vertical lines are, and they may not be vertical if you're actually, depending on how you're holding it, but until they match perfectly with like the grid lines that are on your map. Because most maps have grid lines, which you can use to like properly orient these. So make sure they just match with the up-down grid lines. So now read the degree measure that comes up on this dial now that you've rotated it so these vertical lines that are pointing in the proper direction. Whatever degree measure you get on the dial, that's what we call a bearing. So that's what taking a bearing is. And now physically just get up and rotate yourself. You don't have to use your map necessarily anymore. Just get up and rotate yourself until the red needle again falls inside the orienting arrow. And now you know which direction to travel in. Just make sure this is pointing in that direction and you're not holding it upside down. And that's what a bearing is. It just tells you which, like at which angle or in which general direction you have to go in order to reach a certain point. Again, it's hard to like explain it without like an active illustration of what's happening. So I welcome you to like go to YouTube. There's plenty of good videos there that explain this process with like illustrations. Obviously, the instructions might be a little different depending on which compass that you have. So be aware of that. Make sure just always read the instructions on your compass if you buy one, and if you have to use one, because you don't want to get lost if you ever go hiking. But that does it for today's video. We have plenty of other videos about geography on our channel, so feel free to browse through our site. We also have other subjects. But that does it for today, so thanks for watching.